Brown water crept toward the shallow dirt hollow as the bobcat flattened herself over her hidden cubs. Eyes locked on my outstretched hand. Behind us, the road roared with trucks and the growl of a machine waiting to tear this ditch open if I failed her again. She did not run. She begged, holding the line I once abandoned, and old mistakes throbbed in my chest. To understand why she trusted me in that fragile moment, we have to go back to the quiet days when the little clinic by the curve still felt harmless. By late afternoon, the little clinic at the edge of town glows the colour of weak honey. Dust hangs in the open doorway, turning in the low sun. I lean back from the reception counter and roll my shoulders until they click, listening to the road beyond the pines. Just the hum of a passing pickup, a crow somewhere in the field, the old fridge ticking in the break room. Nothing strange, nothing that needs my attention, I tell myself, though a faint restlessness stirs under my ribs. A draft slips under the front door and snakes along the floor, cool against my ankles in a way that feels personal. I frown at the temperature chart on the wall. The heat is set just where it always is, steady and dull. Out by the porch, something light taps twice against the wooden step. Could be a loose board, could be the wind shifting. My heartbeat gives a small, pointless leap before I smooth my hand flat over my chest and breathe out, slow. On my way to lock the side room, I notice a faint streak on the lower pane of glass. A dull, cloudy oval about knee-high, as if something damp pressed there and slid away. Slow and reluctant, I wipe it with my sleeve, telling myself it is just from a muddy shoe, a careless hand from the afternoon rush. Nothing more. Still, the skin on the back of my neck tightens, like someone is watching me breathe from just beyond the frame. In the treatment room, the stainless tables shine, all wiped down. Bottles lined like soldiers after a long day. I reach to switch off the overhead light and freeze when I hear it again, a faint scrape at the rear door. Then a low thump, as if something bumped the step and settled there to listen. My shoulders climb toward my ears before I force them down. Probably a loose trash can lid, I mutter. Probably the wind. Again, though I do not quite believe it. On the way back up front, I catch my boot on the threshold. The wood there is newly scuffed, thin grooves where the varnish has been lifted in narrow, parallel lines, like someone dragged a tiny rake across it again and again. I crouch, fingertips brushing the mark, feeling how sharp the edges are. Fresh. The air along the hallway seems cooler now, brushing my arms with a draft too focused to be chance, and my breath sounds too loud in my own ears. Outside, the road that curves past the clinic catches the last of the light. Through the front window I watch a sedan come around that bend too fast, tires hissing on the loose gravel before the driver brakes hard. A dark blur darts from the shoulder and disappears beneath the low brush by our sign. The car idles, then moves on. I straighten slowly, pulse ticking in my throat, telling myself it was only a wind-blown bag that found a strange path. Headlights sweep across the front steps, white beams cutting through the dim lobby. An old pickup pulls in too close, gravel spitting. Heavy boots clomp up the short run of stairs, then stop. I hear a muttered curse, a sharp scuff, something small skittering. By the time I reach the door and open it, whoever was there is already turning away, shoulders hunched, leaving only wet boot prints and a faint tremor in the wooden planks beneath my feet. I step onto the porch, the boards trembling once more under my weight. Below the bench by the door, the dirt is freshly disturbed. A small hollow pressed into the dry dust, as if something had slid under there in a hurry. No footprints, no collar, no sound now but my own breathing and the distant whining of a truck on the curve. Something small and watchful is already guarding this place. I just do not know its name yet, and that ignorance sits oddly heavy. By morning, the strange feeling has settled into a low, steady buzz under my ribs. I unlock the clinic, sweep last night's leaves from the porch, and notice the same narrow grooves marching across the threshold. Deeper now, fresher, a little more insistent. The hollow under the bench has caved a little along one side, as if something curled there until dawn and only just slipped away when my tires crunched into the lot. I pause longer than I mean to. Broom held still. Inside, there are other signs if I let myself look instead of rushing to turn off lights. The rug by the exam table is wrinkled toward the door in a narrow track. The metal trash can tipped just enough to show the dented side. On the glass of the front door, 3 small, foggy ovals bloom at ankle height, drying as I watch. They all point the same way, toward the curve where the semis downshift before town, like arrows laid down by a quiet hand. By the 3rd day, I start watching the clock without meaning to, glancing up every few minutes as the hands crawl toward late afternoon. Whatever it is that visits seems to favor a certain hour, just after the school bus goes by, just before the first farmers roll in with weekend emergencies. Around that time, faint padding sounds move along the porch, then a pause, then the lightest tap against the lower part of the door. I hold my breath without deciding to. Rain blows in one afternoon, straight off the hills. The parking lot turns to streaked grey water, our sign rattling on its chains. I am wiping down the front counter when motion at the window hooks my eye. There, on the mat outside, a small speckled shape stands soaked to the skin, paws planted, head lifted. Gold eyes meet mine for a single, drilling heartbeat before the shape spins and vanishes under the bench, leaving only a wet print on the mat. My first thought is simply stray. Some half-wild thing using our porch as a dry island. I tell myself it will move on once the weather clears, that it belongs to the scrub and ditches, not to my exam tables and bottles and careful charts. Still, when I walk out to bring in the evening deliveries, I place the cardboard box just to one side, leaving a clear line open from the bench to the curve in the road, as if I am expecting a guest. After that, the pattern sharpens, like someone finally turned up the contrast. The marks on the floor, the nose smudges, the faint musky smell near the door all line up along one path, as precise as tape on a stage. From the bend in the road to our sign, from the sign to the front step, from the step to that same worn spot on the rug, again and again. Whatever is coming here is not lost. It walks like it has a job to do. Late on a windy Thursday, a delivery van pulls in crooked, bumper almost kissing our porch. The driver swings out, already annoyed, phone to his ear. A small, spotted body stiffens by his boot, lips peeled back in a soundless warning. He jerks, curses, lifts his foot as if to shove it aside. Instinct moves me. I step between them, hand out. Easy. I say, it's just a wild stray. Give it a second to move. My voice comes out sharper than planned. The little body does not move. It holds the space between the man and the corner of the porch, like a soldier guarding a gate. The driver huffs, cuts a mean arc around us, and slams the packages onto the bench. When he roars away, gravel spraying, the creature lowers itself, eyes still fixed on the road. I follow its gaze to that same curve, that same patch of asphalt, and feel an old question stir, sharp and unwelcome in my chest. I have seen wild ones before, out on farm calls or driving home from late surgeries. A tawny blur at the tree line, a shadow slipping between fence posts, the quick flash of a short, black-tipped tail. This little visitor has that look. Not a house stray, not someone's forgotten barn mouser. Bobcat. My training whispers quietly. Thin, young, with those tufted ears and gold eyes that remember every slight and file it away. Years ago, before the clinic, I did relief work for the state rehab centre up in the hills. We saw them all there, hawks with broken wings, foxes caught in snares, the occasional frantic bobcat brought in by a ranger after a brush with a bumper. They were always half wild, even under anaesthesia. Paws twitching, jaws grinding silently while we stitched and splinted and hoped they would forgive just enough to live, just enough to run back into the trees. One spring we took in a female no bigger than a farm dog, ribs showing under her pelt. She had milk, but no young with her, and the absence clung to her like another wound. They found her wandering the shoulder of this same highway, dazed, a torn ear and gravel embedded deep along one flank. For a week she paced the back of her enclosure, eyes fixed on the door as if waiting to be sent down the hill to finish her search. When we finally released her, I drove the transport crate myself. We opened it in a quiet clearing near the county line, the air smelling of pine, sap and diesel from the distant road. She shot out like an arrow, stopped once to look back over her shoulder, and then was gone into the brush. I told myself she would find another den, another chance. Nature is hard, I reminded the interns. Nature wastes nothing, not even heartbreak. Still, her eyes sat with me yellow, furious, accusing. I started taking the long way home to avoid the worst curves, the ones where skid marks lay black and permanent on the pavement. Years later, when the opportunity came to buy this little honey-coloured building by the bend, I joked that at least I would see the trouble coming. I did not admit, even to myself, that I chose it because I already knew the ghosts here by name. There was another spring, another curve, a truck too fast, a sudden shape in the headlights, my own hands locking on the wheel. I braked, swerved, felt the sickening slide as rubber lost its grip on gravel. When everything stopped, the hood crumpled. There was only silence and the ticking of the engine. No animal in sight. No other lights on the road. Just a deep gouge in the dirt where something had fled or been flung. After that night, I never quite shook the feeling that I had failed something I was meant to protect. I turned every small body on my exam tables a little more gently. I watched the curve outside the clinic with a kind of tight ownership, as if bad luck had signed a lease there with my name on it. So when the new marks began on the floor and the hollow appeared under the bench, I felt less surprised than called to attention. Out in the low woods behind the building, I start noticing other signs. A game trail pressed into the grass. Small tracks in the mud by the drainage ditch. The stripped bones of rabbits left clean beneath the blackberry canes. Once, rounding the corner near dusk, I catch her full in profile atop a fallen log. Short tail, spotted coat, ears pricked like questions. A mother, by the look of the lean, hard lines along her sides. She vanishes before my breath is fully drawn, but the impression lingers. This stretch of roadside, these scrubby oaks and ditches, are not just passing ground to her. They are territory, the fragile edge of a life she is building in the thin spaces we leave between parking lots and hayfields. If she circles our porch and stares at that particular curl of asphalt, there is a reason written in muscle and memory and worry. Some evenings I sit on the top step after closing, mug of cooling tea in my hands, watching the shadows lengthen across the clearing. The hollow under the bench waits, the dirt there tamped smooth. I tell myself I am only guarding my property, that I stay because of the clinic, the mortgages, the aging farmers who need a familiar face. But deep down I know I am waiting for her too, and for what she refuses to forget. The first time she truly asks me for something, it is not with sound. It happens on a clear, windless evening when the last appointment has gone and the clinic smells of disinfectant and hay. I step onto the porch, locking the door behind me, and there she is on the far edge of the clearing, exactly where the wild grass gives up to bare dirt. She stands square, watching me, then deliberately turns toward the ditch and pauses. If I look away, if I pretend not to notice, she does not move. When I shift my weight toward the parking lot, her ears flick and her muscles bunch. A tension that says, "No, this way instead." So I do the foolish thing and follow, boots whispering through dry stems. She keeps just ahead of me, never fully turning her back, glancing over her shoulder every few steps to be sure I am still there, still chosen for whatever this is. The dirt clearing she leads me to lies just beyond the clinic's back fence, where a big oak's roots have lifted and left a low pocket in the ground. It looks, at first glance, like nothing. A slump of dust, a scatter of leaves, the faint outline of something that once held water and now only remembers it. She moves to the far side, curls her body around the hollow, and fixes me with a stare that stops me cold in my tracks. Up close I see how thin she really is, hip bones pushing against her spotted coat, the fur along her shoulders clumped from old rain. Her sides move with a rough, steady effort. Beneath her, the dust stirs. A tiny sound leaks out high, muffled, questioning. My breath catches in my throat, hidden in the dirt under her ribs. Deep in that shallow den, something small shifts and presses upward, seeking her steady warmth. She lowers her head and makes a sound I feel more in my bones than in my ears. A low, pleading rumble that trembles on the edge between threat and prayer. Her eyes never leave my face. For one wild second, I imagine she is asking me to climb down there, to put my bare hands into the earth and lift out whatever she has hidden, to carry it somewhere safer. Instead, I sink to my knees at the edge of the clearing and simply stay. Time stretches. The air smells of dust and warm fur, of dry leaves and the faint tang of the highway. A small paw, impossibly delicate, pushes against her belly and disappears again. Another tiny shape nudges up, then burrows back under her legs. Her gaze softens, just a fraction, as if my stillness has earned me a place in this circle. The buzzing under my ribs eases into something quieter, almost reverent and steady. At last, she shifts, exposing the rim of the den. The earth there is freshly clawed, dark and crumbly against the pale outer crust. I reach out one hand, palm open, not to touch her or the cubs, but to feel the warmth rising from that small, hidden chamber. It is like standing at the doorway of a stranger's home with the door cracked just enough to smell soup on the stove. Invited no further, but not shut out entirely. A truck growls, downshifting on the curve, and her head snaps up. Every muscle in her body tightens. She stands over the hollow, legs braced, eyes pinned to the bend in the road. Only when the engine noise fades does she flick a glance back at me. Urgent, insistent. The pattern clicks at last. Her path from den to porch to road. Her watch on that particular stretch of asphalt. Guardian, not trespasser. Written in her stance. That night, I drag an old plywood sheet from the shed. When she is away hunting, I prop it up over the den against the forecasted rain, leaving room for her to slip beneath. It feels like a trespass, a human hand rearranging the edges of her world. But when I check at dawn, the board is still in place, paw prints stitched in the damp dirt beneath. She has accepted the shelter, or at least forgiven it enough to use it. From then on, our days bend around that hollow. I schedule farm calls between the hours she most often patrols the porch. I keep my voice low when I step outside, announce myself like a guest. Sometimes, as the light goes gold and the dust glows around us, she lets me see the flicker of tiny shapes beneath her again. I sit on the step, mug in my hands. Keeping watch with her over the road, we both mistrust deeply. Summer tilts toward its hottest weeks, and the weather radio starts using words like severe and watch closely. Thunderheads build over the hills in the afternoons, piling up like grey anvils. I call the county office about the drainage ditch behind the clinic, worried the den could flood, but they only hear standing water and erosion. A crew chief promises to come look, his tone brisk, already weighing costs. Not lives or young. The mother senses something shifting long before any truck appears. She roams wider in daylight now, cutting from the den to the porch and back in quick, tense arcs. More than once I open the door to find her planted square on the top step, body low, tail twitching, eyes locked on the bend in the road. Her ears flick toward every engine note that does not sound like the usual mail carrier or feed truck slowing. Word travels fast in a town this size. Mrs. Delaney from the bakery mentions seeing a spotted thing by my sign. A rancher jokes too loudly about needing a new pelt for his den wall. Even kind Mr. Vega, who brings his old collie in for arthritis shots, clears his throat and asks if it is safe to have a wild bobcat raising young so close to the road. Lawsuits, he says softly, like the word itself might summon them. I know the risks. I hear the fear around children waiting for buses. Imagine worst-case scenarios. A startled animal, a careless hand, a flash of teeth. But when I picture removing her, calling a trapper or begging the rehab centre for space they do not have, my stomach clenches. She chose this thin strip of ground because we carved away all the other places that might have held her family safely. And that truth burns. One blistering afternoon, a lifted pickup takes the curve too fast. Radio blaring. Gravel spits and the back end fishtails toward the ditch. Out of nowhere, she is there. A spotted bolt crossing the asphalt, planting herself between the truck and the low place where her den lies. The driver jerks the wheel, snapping the vehicle straight. He leans out, cursing, while she holds her ground until the engine fades away. After that, I start keeping a log on a clipboard by the door. Time. Weather. What vehicle passed when she reacted? The pattern is unmistakable. Her agitation spikes whenever a certain county flatbed rolls by. The one with orange cones stacked in crooked towers. She crouches on the porch as it approaches, then rushes the edge of the lot, snarling under her breath, as if her anger alone could dent its heavy plans. The day the crew finally arrives, the air feels wrong from dawn. Too still, too heavy. The clouds stacked high but holding their rain. Their truck idles by the ditch while men in reflective vests pace and point. Boots crumbling the bank just above the hidden chamber. I walk out with my clipboard like a shield, explaining there is active wildlife here. Young ones in the ground. They nod. Non-committal. Eyes on schedules and bids. Well, rip out this section and regrade it, the chief says, tapping the map on his hood. Get the water moving right. Shouldn't take more than a day once we bring the excavator down. I look past him to where she prowls at the tree line, body stretched thin with fury, and feel the choice rising in my throat. Either I convince them to wait, or that metal arm will scoop her world into a neat, indifferent pile. That evening, the storm finally breaks. Rain hammers the roof, rattling the windows in their frames. I stand in the treatment room, listening to the gutters overflow, imagining water pouring into that shallow basin under the oak. A shape lunges against the back door. Then another. Thin cries spill through the gap near the threshold. Sharp and desperate. She is there, soaked, eyes wide, flinging herself at the wood. When I open the door, she does not flee. Instead, she wheels and bolts into the downpour, then stops halfway to the fence, looking back, body shaking with urgency. It is not hard to read. Come. Now. I grab a flashlight and a worn blue blanket from the supply shelf and follow. Boots sliding in the mud. The rain turns the clearing into a smear of grey, but the hollow under the board is already a boiling brown puddle. She stands over it, torn between diving back in and lashing out at the sky itself. The ground around the den slumps, small rivulets cutting through the walls. A sodden, tiny body tumbles partway into view before her jaws grip it and haul it back, depositing it against her chest. Another thin cry rises from deeper in the mud. She looks at me then, truly looks, and everything in that gaze is plea, not threat or warning. Behind us, on the road, an engine growls, a familiar flatbed, downshifting at the curve despite the storm. Its headlights smear across the trees, then swing toward the lot. Tomorrow they mean to tear this place apart. Tonight, the water is already playing their role. My options narrow to a single, sharp point. Either I help her lift these lives out of the drowning dirt, or I watch them disappear under it forever. I do not remember making the decision, only the feeling of my body moving before my mind can argue. I splash down into the runoff beside the den, knees sinking into cold mud. The blanket soaks through instantly. She snarls, a ragged, broken sound, but she does not strike. Her eyes weld themselves to mine as I slide my hands under the first shivering bundle and lift, dirt and water streaming from its fur and whiskers. The cub fits in my palms like a wet, furious heart, all claws and twisting spine. I tuck it into the fold of the blanket against my chest and reach back, groping along the collapsing wall. Another small body bumps my fingers, then clings. Above us, the mother shifts her weight to brace the remaining earth, front paws digging grooves into the rim as if she could hold the storm back with bones alone and sheer will. We make a clumsy chain, she and I. She drags each cub to the mouth of the hollow. I scoop and move them to the higher ground of the oak's far roots, where the dirt still holds firm beneath the grass. By the time the last thin cry fades into the shelter of the blanket, my hands are numb and caked, my jeans heavy with rain. She circles them all, counting with her nose, then lifts her head and meets my gaze again. The sound she makes this time is softer, almost hoarse, a low, breaking note that knocks something loose inside my chest. It is not gratitude the way humans mean it, with words and depth. It is recognition, of shared labour, of the line I have crossed between observer and accomplice. For the first time since I bought this building by the bend, I feel I am exactly where I am meant to be. At the moment, I am needed. By dawn, the storm has wrung itself out. The ditch is a raw scar, its old shapes slumped and half gone. We have built a makeshift nest in a big plastic kennel just inside the back room door. Fresh straw, dry towels, the blankets still smelling of mud and milk. The cubs sleep in a tight knot, bellies finally round. Their mother lies half in, half out of the open kennel, one paw hooked over the lip, watching me breathe. Outside, diesel engines rumble. The county flatbed and the excavator crawl into place like patient predators. I step onto the porch, exhausted, hair still damp, and meet the crew chief at the bottom of the stairs. Behind me, a small spotted head appears in the gap of the open door, ears pricked, nose testing the morning. The men freeze, eyes widening as they take in the wild shape in my familiar doorway. You weren't kidding. One of them mutters. The chief swears under his breath. Ma'am, we can't have that thing this close to a work site, he says, jerking his thumb toward her. Somebody's gonna get hurt. As if to underline his point, a familiar delivery van swings into the lot, brakes squealing. The same driver from before hops out, sees her by the threshold, and his face hardens into something ugly and set. He strides toward the steps, boots throwing little rock. You feeding it now. He snaps. You'll have it taking hands off kids next. The mother stands, placing herself squarely across the doorway, body low over the invisible line where her cubs sleep. When he lifts one boot to shove her aside, the world narrows to that single, crude motion, the arc of his leg, the vulnerable ribs under her speckled coat. I move without thinking, swinging down off the porch into his path. His boot catches my thigh instead of her flank. A hard, shocking blow that sends pain lancing up to my hip. I plant my hands against his chest and shove back. No, I say, voice shaking but loud enough to cut across the idling engines. You don't touch her. She's protecting her den, the same way you'd protect your own front door. The words taste like steel. For a second I think he might push past anyway. Then he looks beyond me, to where she now stands at my shoulder. She is close enough that I can feel the heat of her, the wild heartbeat thudding under her ribs. Her eyes are not on him, though they are fixed on the flatbed's license plate, on the stenciled county logo, on the men walking toward the ditch with spray-painted stakes in their hands, calm and distracted. Suddenly, the years fold together the wounded mother at the rehab center. The skid marks on this curve, the empty space where something once lay in my headlights. She has been tracing this same triangle, road to porch to den, not to haunt me, but to force my gaze where it needs to be. Not on my old fear, but on the living danger to her family now. I step back up onto the porch and square myself to the crew. Heart hammering. You tear that ditch out today, I tell them, and you drown these cubs we just pulled from the mud. You also keep this curve a blind. Slick mess. I gesture toward the flooded rut, the crumbling bank. Or you give me a week. You'll get a rehab permit, move them beyond the county line, and well put up a proper sign and a barrier while you redesign. Either way, she's not the problem here. Our neglect is the clearing hushes, the compromise, when it comes, is quieter than the fight that forced it. The crew chief calls his supervisor, jaw tight, while I ice my leg in the lobby with the mother lying just inside the doorway. A silent sentinel. In the end, they give me the week I demanded. Paperwork is faxed. Permits rushed. The rehab centre sends a counsellor who raises her brows at the setup, then helps me make it official and safe. We do not cage the mother. Instead, we build a wooden barrier along the worst part of the curve and shift the cub's kennel higher up the slope under the oak, reinforcing the roof, widening the entrance she uses. The excavator waits at the far end of the ditch, its metal arm folded like a patient bird. Every day the crew works on sections farther down while she patrols above, eyes always flicking back to her brood. By the time the cubs are big enough to clamber over each other in play, the ditch has a new shape, its sides stepped and seeded with grass. A bright yellow sign warns drivers before the bend, and a simple wooden rail keeps cars from sliding straight into the low spot. I see fewer black skid marks now, fewer beer cans in the weeds. The road looked, for the first time, like it was designed by someone who cared. Our routines not together. In the mornings, I sweep the porch and check the tracks in the soft dust, reading the night like a diary. Late afternoons, as the sun goes down and light turns thick and gold, she often brings the cubs to the edge of the clearing. They crouch in the shadow of the bench while I sit on the top step, sipping coffee gone lukewarm, watching cars ease through the curve a little more slowly. Sometimes a client glimpses them and freezes mid-sentence. I keep my voice low and steady, explaining from the doorway that they are wild and must stay that way, that we are simply sharing a boundary for a season. There is grumbling, yes, but also wonder. Mrs. Delaney brings stale bread for the birds and stands a little longer at the window. Mr. Vega tips his hat toward the oak as if greeting old friends. The anger that once knotted my shoulders loosens. I still remember the sick skid of tires, the empty ditch, the sense of having failed something fragile and nameless. But now, when I dream of that night, there is another image layered over it. My hands in the mud, lifting small, squirming bodies into light while their mother watched. The road outside is still dangerous, but it is no longer ruled by my fear. We end most days the same way now. She settles on the patch of bare dirt just beyond the porch, where she first halted me, her body a warm, solid curve around the cubs. I sit on the step above, one hand resting on the grain of the rail, the other around a mug. Together we watch the last car pass, the dust settle, the sky fade. When the porch light flicks on, its circle of yellow touches us both and feels like a promise. Seasons slide forward. The cubs lengthen into lean adolescence. Spots fading, paws too big for their bodies. One crisp morning I step out to find only 2 where there were 3. A week later, only 1. The last youngster lingers by the oak for a few more days, torn between the safety of the old den and the pool of the dark line of hills beyond the pasture. Then, quietly, it too is gone, leaving the clearing thinner. The mother does not vanish. Her patrols stretch wider again, but she still threads her route past the clinic, leaving prints on the porch after rain. A single tuft of fur caught on the corner of the bench. Sometimes, late at night when paperwork has me hunched at the desk, I feel the faintest bump against the front step, hear the soft exhale of breath on glass. I look up to find her eyes on mine, steady and calm. We keep a few small things from that summer. The mud-stained blue blanket, washed and folded, lives on a shelf in the back room. The board that once shielded the den becomes a ramp for aging dogs who can no longer manage stairs. The plywood with the deepest claw marks leans against the shed, weathering slowly. A quiet monument to the day a wild mother trusted a human enough to share her fear and her work. When new clients ask about the sign at the curve or the wooden rail by the ditch, I tell them the story in pieces as we walk from car to door. I talk about bad drainage and careless design, about permits and compromise. Sometimes, if they seem the listening type, I add the part about the cubs hidden in the dirt and their mother's eyes in the storm. How she stood on the threshold and begged without a single word. On warm evenings, I leave the door open a crack and sit on the step with my mug, letting the sounds of crickets and distant trucks braid together. The hollow under the bench is only a shallow dip now, but I never quite sweep it flat. It reminds me that this place is watched over from more than one direction. I am not the only guardian here. I am simply the one with hands, ready when they are needed. If this story touched your heart, drop a simple 1 in the comments to let us know you were here. Your support keeps these gentle stories alive. Don't forget to subscribe and stay with us, because the next story might just be the one that finds you when you least expect it.